Sea of Stars is a retro-inspired, turn-based RPG from Sabotage Studio, out of Quebec City, Canada. It follows the story of Zale and Valere, two solstice warriors, chosen ones with power deriving from the sun and the moon, as they embark on an adventure to save their world from the lingering forces of the Fleshmancer, a godlike alchemist who deposited a variety of monsters on their planet after visiting it in the distant past. It was funded through Kickstarter and served as a prequel to the studio's earlier game, The Messenger. The developers cite Chrono Trigger, Breath of Fire, and other classic console RPGs as inspiration for the game. However, their goal was to create a game that evokes those old standards while also updating the mechanics to more align with modern audience tastes, and eliminate some of the tedious trends of the genre, such as level grinding and unclear fetch quests. Combat is not treading new ground and is fairly standard for the genre. The main new mechanic is the lock system. When mobs begin charging up their stronger abilities, a lock will appear with symbols correlating to the elemental and physical damage types. If the player can match the symbols before the attack launches, the attack is interrupted and the enemy is stunned until the next combat round before they can respond, giving a chance for your guys to jump them. Healing is largely done through party abilities and cooking meals at campfires for use in or out of combat. It's a functional system with some gourmet cutaways during the food prep stage, but nothing too revolutionary. The meal list is also the most obviously Canadian part of the game, other than the one NPC who speaks Canadia Elvish. Overall, the game is not particularly difficult. Characters who are KO'd will return to the fight after a few turns pass with a fair chunk of health, preventing the typical RPG death spiral of cascading damage as characters are KO'd and enemies focus attacks down on survivors. Over the course of my 30-hour playthrough, I never saw the game over screen, and the game does not seem to require any significant understanding of party building or optimization theorycraft. Sea of Stars immediately introduces several options, called relics, to decrease the difficulty, with options to increase the difficulty introduced only between the midpoint and endgame. I found the early game to be sluggish due to the simplicity and lack of options, although as the game opened up around the 10-hour mark and the party filled out, combat did become more interesting. Dungeon design is fairly streamlined. Typically, the player advances until they reach a three-forked path, where the left and right paths lead to switches that unlock the way forwards. This happens so frequently it becomes second nature by the midpoint of the game. Dungeons also feature some fairly standard push-block puzzles, levers, and light beam puzzles, and a few memory puzzles. Most of them are fairly simple, but there are a few that can take a couple of tries. There doesn't seem to be any danger of locking yourself out of areas or treasure with a failed attempt, and generally leaving and re-entering a zone seems to reset the incomplete puzzle. It's all a bit forgiving for the genre, nothing that really halts progress or requires a guide. There are also a few optional minigames, such as Wheels, which is a sort of slot machine-based auto-battler that really tickles the degenerate gambler portion of my brain, and a fishing minigame, which is simple, and elevated mostly by the music and the ambiance. Plus a few other minigames better left as a surprise. There's also a town that can be built up, usually one of my favorite mechanics in any game, but here it is fairly underdeveloped and solely tied to the completion of a collectible list. It's no Suikoden 2, but it's there and provides some slight benefit in the form of providing cooking ingredients for recovery items. As far as bugs, I only encountered a single issue in my playthrough. A character became invincible after level up and would not take any damage. It resolved itself after restarting the game, so hopefully other players have an equally smooth experience. Graphic and sound design are clearly the highlight of Sea of Stars. Sprite work is detailed, animations are smooth, and they've provided dozens of situational, one-use animations and sprites to keep the game interesting. Traveling through Sea of Stars is a delight. Each location is beautifully designed with wonderful, varied color palettes and sweeping vistas. They've both captured and improved upon the retro aesthetic they've targeted. However, the game seems hesitant to give characters any quiet moments. Every time we have a sweeping shot of the sea or a mountain range or a strange mansion, the moment is either rushed or partially blocked with a text box of a character explaining what they're seeing. It tends to clutter up an image with unnecessary noise, and often I wished they had just left the visual linger. for a moment and speak for itself. Enemies are interesting and easily identifiable by silhouette and stance. Bosses are worth a special mention, as they are all quite inspired and unique, with some paying homage to the bosses of other familiar series, with plenty of original bosses as well. Animations on enemies are clear to read and provide the player with a visual indication of when to parry, except for the Bird Knight and his 4 fake-out strikes. I loathe the Birdman. Each of the game's islands is clearly designed around a major set piece. For example, the Sleeper, or the Watcher, or the Kickstarter Graveyard. On the one hand, it provides a clear sense of direction, but on the other, it tends to overwhelm the location as you wait for your exploration to finally approach the set piece. Occasionally, the game will break from the standard sprites to show an animated cutscene of characters in major moments, reminiscent of the Chrono Trigger PS1 release. These are a real treat, well animated and brief enough not to interrupt the action of the game. Sometimes they're used to show action that would be difficult to pull off with sprite work, and they're an exciting addition to the game. The music for this game is perfect. I cannot imagine another soundtrack working as well with the game they've created. The music team collaborated with Yasunori Mitsuda, composer of Chrono Trigger and my personal favorite video game track. I'm talking about Wind Scene. When it isn't evoking Chrono Trigger, we hear flashes of Harvest Moon or an early Final Fantasy entry. It captures the tone they were aiming for perfectly. Nostalgia, youthful adventure, danger, and even a certain sweetness. I don't know if it would appeal to someone with no history of playing those early RPGs, but I suspect it would still be pleasant at worst. This is a soundtrack to add to your playlist. I have some issues with the story. It's frankly serviceable but generic, and features several one-note characters and a few archetypes that are already very dated. Character dialogue is generally extremely simplistic. Everyone just sort of constantly states their motives, what the next objective is, how great of friends they all are, unblinking fourth wall breaking, and exposition about the current area. There are almost no moments where party members have opposing ideas or beliefs, and few characters ever have their worldview tested or changed in any way. Again, all the main characters are very earnest in their dealings, and it all comes across as somewhat childish, though I suppose that might be what they're going for, as many older console RPGs did have, similarly, one-dimensional characters. A brief warning that I will be discussing some spoilers for both this game and Chrono Trigger. Here's the timestamp to my concluding statements if you'd like to avoid those spoilers. The story of Sea of Stars is fairly generic. The 2 Chosen One main characters are trained from birth to eliminate the Dwellers, powerful monsters left behind by the Fleshmancer. They are eventually joined by Garl, their childhood best friend, Sarai, a pirate ninja cyborg, Roshan, a godlike alchemist, and eventually Bst, an ancient ghost inhabiting a body of living glass. We also ally with a pirate crew who are annoying. Our heroes travel through the world, saving a few small towns and eliminating their first target, the Dweller of Woe, at which point they are betrayed by the previous generation of Solstice Warriors. The betrayal was well telegraphed and doesn't make too much sense if you examine their reasoning. After this, the plot quickly devolves into a series of fetch quests punctuated by fighting Dwellers. Along the way, the Fleshmancer confronts the group and mortally wounds Garl, who pleads with the alchemist and is given enough extra time to finish one great task before he dies. He uses his fruit fly lifespan to tame the Sleeper, a dragon that is rumored to destroy the world when it wakes up. No, not that one. This one. After he tames the dragon, Garl dies. It's a very effective moment in a story with too few of them. The party continues on into a second world, repeats the fetch quest and dweller routine, and then we confront the Fleshmancer, who walks off and leaves his lieutenant to deal with us. It's a fairly simple, easy fight. I don't think I saw all of her attacks before it was over. After loading the pre-fight save, we unlock a time travel device that takes the team back to the moment Garl was hit by the Fleshmancer's attack. Here, the game shamelessly rips Chrono Trigger's Doppeldoll quest. Zale and Valere remove Garl from the time stream at the moment the Fleshmancer struck him, and substitute in Bzzt, who morphs into the same general shape as Garl. The party then digs Bzzt out of Garl's grave and finally confronts the Fleshmancer, who is forced to flee the planet, presumably forever. The issue with this plotline is that Garl, our sweet bread boy, did not immediately die from the blast. He bartered for more time and used that time for the most notable section of his arc, waking the sleeper. So the question arises, did Garl or Bzzt wake the sleeper? Garl also references being dead and brought back. However, since time was halted and he was pulled away from the attack that initially killed him, he was never struck and thus never died. It's tricky as this is all optional content that one could easily not see, but it has really bizarre implications for the story. It's also a fairly shameless complication of what were otherwise the most effective moments of the plot. It seems like it could have been accomplished in a tidier way, or not at all, and it left me feeling a bit cold on the game. Sometimes dead is better. I'm against assigning games a numerical score value, much in the same way I wouldn't go to the Museum of Art and start ranking all the paintings. I believe that almost any game can be someone's favorite game. Even a headache-inducing Virtual Boy release might be a cherished childhood memory for someone like me. So I find it more useful to simply list the strong and weak points, and an overall recommendation. Sea of Stars certainly excels in the animation and music, but the combat wobbles unevenly between exciting and boring, depending on the section and the general RPG veterancy of the player. The story is fairly rote and revolves around numerous fetch quests. Many of the characters do not have strong character moments, particularly memorable lines, or much sense of agency. Depending on your tastes, the 30-hour runtime may be a boon or a bust. Personally, I wish some of the fetch quests were axed, and some of the puzzles were so easy that they did not seem to add anything to the game. Ultimately, this is a great game for those seeking to recapture the nostalgia of those early console RPGs. However, the problem with a game designed to be nostalgic is that those old games still exist. I'd find it very hard to recommend this game over Legend of Mana or Chrono Trigger, and unfortunately someone with a lot of experience in turn-based RPGs will likely have an experience like mine, finding the combat somewhat unchallenging and the characters and plot a little too familiar to be interesting. But if you're a lover of these kinds of RPGs and have already mastered all the classics, it will certainly scratch a familiar itch. I would highly recommend Sea of Stars to a gamer who doesn't have much experience with the 90s console RPGs and wants to dip their toes in, as the game features many quality of life improvements, such as objective tracking on the map, that older games did not have. This eliminates the need to refer to a strategy guide, and likewise, the game does not require any extensive grinding or have any enemies that will one-shot the team or require hyper-specific item strategies to defeat. It's a pleasant experience with highly customizable difficulty settings, and I don't think anyone will be throwing their controllers through the wall while playing Sea of Stars. I also suspect that if I had played this game around the same time I played Chrono Trigger, it may have been life-changing. It's rated E10, so while it was marketed as a nostalgic return to form for older gamers, it may actually be a terrific experience for younger players just getting into games. I might be against assigning objective scores to the game, but I'm not against describing my subjective experience. On the pain scale, I'd give this one a moderate. I had fun with it, but it rarely wowed me, and I don't think I'd be interested in playing it again for quite a while. Well, that's it. That's my first review. See ya!